That's good, I would say.
Now, I'm sure you've heard this several times. Less movement as possible is greater.
Yep.
So I don't have to keep shifting the camera on.
Sure.
So you want it that close. I'm gonna do.
And I think we want to sort of be conscious of you repeating the question somewhat in the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want me to repeat the question or not?
Or what do you think?
Not repeat the question.
Mm-hmm.
If you can answer the question and
incorporate it.
How you. Basically, when you give your answer, incorporate the question.
Okay.
Combine.
He's a good director.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
I've done this several times.
Okay.
I've actually been the one that somebody's told me that several times. What I'm going to do is I'm going to.
At this very moment.
Are you really? Yes. But do you do any sort of physical routines, walking, biking?
Up until 1 week ago, I did nothing.
Your whole life?
Well, I've always been fairly active, bicycling.
Oh, you bicycle.
But I haven't in years. All of my exercise stopped about 10 years ago.
Consciously or just?
No, my office became sort of all-consuming. I have an old house, so weekends are spent working around the property or working on a car. And if I can sneak away, I go fishing. So I've got stream fishing, and that's good exercise, a lot of walking and hiking about.
Fishing's good.
But
what, freshwater or?
Freshwater, primarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, so trout fishing is what I care for, stream fishing.
Wow. What's the word?
Trout.
No, scream?
Stream.
Scream.
No, stream. S-T-R-E-A-M.
Oh, stream.
Right,
Stream.
right.
I get you.
Stream is what happens when you throw the lure the wrong way to get the wrong guy.
You scream when you. And did you raise a family?
No kids.
But you're married?
Yep.
How many years?
35 years.
How do you explain the longevity?
We get along well together, and she basically lets me do my own thing. She's sort of willing to accept the fact that because I'm creative, we're involved in a creative field, I have strange hours, and we just get on fine. She has her own life and career. I have mine.
What's her career?
She's a designer.
Wow, Jim, that's...
Yeah. All right, now turning this off.
Thank you. We don't have to tell you that. Oh, you want to just show that?
I'm just waiting for it.
Yeah, are you on bait? What kind of bait you use?
Flies. I tie my own.
So that's a real art form.
Yeah.
Tying your own. What's the material they use?
You use feathers and you use wool or other artificial materials to tie
on a hook.
Yeah, you tie on the shank, then you wrap the feather around, creates called hackle. These look like little wings.
Right.
And the objective is that for a dry fly, it lets the fly float on the water.
No glue or anything?
You use a little bit of glue, but what I use is I use lacquer. I put a drop of lacquer down and it
just hardens and holds it.
Yeah.
And it's really just a question of holding because it's a sort of...
That's right. This is an art form that goes back to Scotland and this probably the 1600s.
It's a lot more even on both sides now.
It looks and sounds...
Now, only because I've done this several times and I'm breaking a rule right now, he is looking to the left. In an interview, you want him to be looking, basically if the camera's on me, I want to be looking to the left or to the right of the camera, signifying that's
so
where
I
the
should be over
interview
there?
is.
I can move over there.
Somewhat, so he's not looking like this and I'm shooting like this.
Oh no, I can move over there. That's not a problem.
Good point, Anthony.
Yeah. Jeez. I usually have these, when IFC or Egg Show came to me, I start interviewing the guys setting up so I can learn from them.
Right.
You want him to be looking...
You may want to move that bag out of the way.
Yep.
There you go.
Pile of stuff in there. It
So,
was cold outside. So
Yeah, it really was. I was amazed. It was chilly this morning.
Why don't you take, if you're hot, take your...
Now,
that's actually really good. Now, how's that?
It's okay.
Jim, clean your glass. There's one little speck there that might be caught. On this side, yeah.
This side over here?
At the bottom rim. Maybe it's...
How's that? Is it going?
No,
Nope.
Here, you want me to do it on this?
Yeah, if you can.
Let's see if it comes off. Oh, it's just in your glass.
In the glass.
Yeah, no big deal.
Okay. Well, I can leave the glasses off for that matter if you want.
No,
No,
I
keep it on.
think they
Okay.
agreed, and that's fine with me.
All right, now just look at him.
Okay, Jim.
All right,
Aren't I a beautiful
that's
guy?
You're great
Like
looking.
the black man on the subway said, "You got nice hair, man. Give me $1."
Right.
Now, stay out of your way.
That's smart. No.
You said, yeah, you should have said, because I got nice hair, you give me $1.
Actually, you know what? You look just like my father.
Is that right?
Yes, it's a real pleasure
That's
to be
amazing.
talking to you.
Now-
You are my pseudo father in a lot of ways.
It's amazing.
Spawned a lot of good things.
Are we ready?
Doug?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to sit exactly the way you're going to sit when I say go.
Okay.
Not.
And how long is this going to be?
I'm not saying we're.
Let's break
Okay.
at an hour and then see what's
But
going
the most
on.
common thing everybody does when I say action is that they sit up.
Yep. No,
That everything, and then the
I'll
shot.
probably sit like this.
That's good then.
I'll slouch my way through it.
Okay.
Now you go by Jim or James? Which
Jim.
do you prefer? Prefer Jim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, just so you know, the technique of shooting is I'm giving him a little lead room to the left of the camera because that's where you are.
All right.
So it doesn't look off-centered. That's the way
Okay.
it should be shot. If
Yeah.
he's looking towards you.
I like should be's.
Hmm.
I don't like gotta's. I like should be's. There's too many gottas in the world. It's got to be this.
It's going to get worse. It's going to
It's
get worse.
gonna be worse. That's Homeland Gotta Security.
Yep. Gotta have. Gotta do. Gotta kill.
Whenever you gentlemen would like to start, please do so.
Oh, that's good. I understand.
And Doug, you're ready?
Yeah.
You're rolling?
Yeah.
Both roll and go?
Yeah.
Okay, Jim Wickstead, so good to see you here. Appreciate all your attention to this great invention. Let's start out. What first attracted you to pursue inventing?
Well, pursuing inventing is one of those funny things. I don't really know what ever got me going. I guess I was dissatisfied with things which I saw. I had ideas, and I just decided I want to try to make them happen. It started with little things. When I was a kid, actually in just the first year in high school, I started to build my own automobiles because I didn't happen to like the cars that I saw. So I built my own what are called Class H racing cars. So I ended up designing the body, building the body, soon the chassis, modifying engines, and I guess that got me going. And it's always just been sort of a passion. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I'm doing it, because in some regards it is very greatly unrewarding until you get that one product which is wonderful, and then suddenly, like Pixel, all the bad experiences go away. But I think it's just it's one of those things that's in your blood, and I don't think you can necessarily say where it came from or what strange aberration put it there.
Maybe you can give us a background. Where were you born? What year were you born? And then what did you study, say, in college?
Well, I was born in New Jersey, born in 1941 in May. Ended up going to two schools. I started at Rensselaer Polytech in mechanical engineering. Left that almost immediately. I didn't like it. I had, in the meantime, heard from an uncle about a new profession which seemed to be more akin to what I was doing. It was called industrial design. And industrial design, as I understood it at that moment, was a styling type of profession, but in reality it was more of an educational experience. So I ended up going to industrial design school. I went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn and graduated from there with a degree, Bachelor of Industrial Design.
Do you feel what you learned in college prepared you for a career in inventing, or was it tinkering with the cars early on more? Was there one that prepared you more as an inventor?
Well, I think that probably tinkering prepared me for inventing, but certainly college nurtured it because it gave me, I think, a professional perspective on that invention isn't a wild, crazy, frizzy-haired thing. It's essential. As a matter of fact, industrial design usually incorporates some level of invention but styles around it. And the fact of the matter is every product we touch or go near has been probably, at least gently or very heavily, influenced by invention, by designers. And I saw the designer and the invention process suddenly melding all as one basic common discipline.
who were your role models, say, growing up, and maybe a couple role models throughout your life? And what specifically did you learn from them, or how did they specifically inspire you?
I really didn't have role models. I grew up in New Jersey, and very much in the country. I was influenced, I think, strongly by one of the high school instructors I had, a fellow named Kenneth Carpenter. Wildly creative. Today he would be considered a hippie. Back then he probably was not. But he was very creative, and his thing was, make it happen, do it. Anything you want, you can make happen. Had an uncle who was very supportive of the arts. My parents were quite wonderful because they let me do anything I wanted. If I wanted to do something weird, esoteric, build something, I built a car in the basement. They let me do it. The odor of fiberglass wafting through the floors in the kitchen, driving my mother crazy. She never complained. So, people like this have been influences. But ultimately, you look around and you see products, and I think it's the products that influence you. You see an automobile, and you suddenly say, that is a very complex piece of design and assembly. And you look at some portions of it and you say, that is really creative. That is wild. What crazy person ever came up with this neat idea? Where did you ever get it from? And it inspires you.
So maybe we can reproduce that 15 minutes you did in the conference today. Basically, my question was, can you discuss the origins of the PXL-2000? And in that regard, when you speak of Kurosawa and Bergman, maybe you can elaborate a little. Where were you going to see these? I imagine it was a theater, and what sort of atmosphere around that? Yeah,
well, this was really when I was in college. My first year in college. Remember, I'm a boy from the country coming to Brooklyn, New York. This was sort of a life-altering experience, as they would say today, because it was a whole different culture. But I was thrown in with designers, artists, excuse me, architects, people who were already so far beyond me. And I was becoming exposed to things that I had never seen. And the movie was a genre that I had suddenly taken hold of, because I had never seen Bergman films before, Kurosawa films. These were all art students I'm with. They know about them. They're saying, let's go to the films. We see these flicks, and they kind of blew me away. Prior to that, I'd seen just a little bit of it, but suddenly it was everyday fare. So that was very inspiring, and I was taken by the beauty and the incredible simplicity of the films, especially Bergman, coming from rather rural and austere Sweden, Kurosawa coming from a very Spartan environment and methodology from Japan. His films, in some regards, almost Zen-like at times, quite lovely. And he was not the only Japanese film director. There were many others. But it was that wonderful graininess that intrigued me. And while I was at college, I started to do more and more photography, drifted very quickly into black and white. Pretty soon, my little kitchen sink had been transformed into my photographic laboratory. People going into the fridge, if they grabbed the wrong bottle, would probably be writhing on the floor, dying. But I was doing my own stuff. I was processing my film, shooting it, processing it, hyping it to get high graininess out of it. And I suppose the fact that pixel vision became such a grainy media was very acceptable to me, because I was already used to grain. As a matter of fact, I was working hard on grain and blocking up imaging. So it was really at college that I think started to develop my real interest in black and white imaging. At that time, remember, there were no camcorders. This was strictly still photography. But the wonderful power that it had just was amazing to me, and I developed a tremendous love for it.
That was good. I wanted to ask you to go back a second. What do you think attracted you to black and white graininess? Maybe discuss that. I was going to say living in the country, the landscapes, or you saw like the photographs of you saw other photographers. Was there any sort of thing you could elaborate in that regard?
I don't know why I picked up on graininess. There was something about it. It was like beach sand to me. It was lovely.
It was like what?
Beach sand.
Beach sand.
And I just had a feel for it. I have seen and have a high regard for a lot of the high resolution photography, atoms and lakes, working with an 8x10. But when I was in school, I splurged and I bought myself a wonderful 35mm camera that could take cold weather. And my friends and I used to go down in the Bowery on these cold winter nights and photograph there with using available light. And because at that time we were dealing with very high-speed film, it inherently had grain. And I liked the imaging I got. It was more implied. It was more impressive. It was more my vision of art as opposed to documentary. And it's, I suppose, one person's thing. I just happen to find that a very attractive media. And I can also tell you I have the highest regard and have done very high resolution stuff. I have a 4x5. I have used that extensively. But I love the empathic quality of small frame black and white, because it gives you the sense of, I am there this very moment. I have not set this up, and I have not overly intellectualized on what's in front of me.
That's great. Now maybe we could fast forward like you did in the talk from, that was 63-ish,
yeah,
to when you started your company and then the pizza party.
Yeah.
Do you want the water?
No, thank you. The company actually was started in '68, and as companies go, it started strangely. It was going to be a design office, but I wanted to develop products. And it started over a liquor store, a little company, myself, 2 other people. And it soon began to evolve into something quite a bit larger. I began to take on different engineering disciplines who became part of the engineering development support process. We moved to much larger facilities where I still am today. And we began to evolve more into real product development, but also invention. And we began to invent things, and much to my shock, we licensed to the toy industry. The first big licensing we did was actually to Parker Brothers. And the reason was Parker Brothers came to us, they'd heard of us through another company, and they had a terrible problem. They were doing handheld games. These were back now in the games in the late 70s, early 80s, and the games were terribly expensive, and they didn't know what to do. They knew there was a great market, but they didn't know how to do it. We spent 2 weeks being paid developing a new technology approach for them, which reduced the price from $20 down to about $8. And Parker Brothers was impressed. We had done a very good job for them. My engineers primarily, I just worried about it. But it turned into a very lucrative deal because we licensed the technology. And then they asked us to begin to develop some games because they were sort of at a loss as to what games could go on it. So we developed games for it. And the games became very popular and sold huge numbers. And after that, we suddenly were in demand. Suddenly the medical product industry came to us. And we began to do medical products. We developed a technology called patient-controlled analgesia, PCA as it's now known. And it was the first time it had ever been done. We did it for a company called C.R. Bard, a major company in New Jersey. We did it turnkey. The reason they came to us, they were so afraid of having it connected with their company's name if it failed, because this gave a patient the opportunity to press a button when he was in the hospital and give himself some morphine or Demerol, self-infuse himself to otherwise maintain his pain level or lack of pain level. Prior to that, you would get an injection at prescribed intervals, and you were normally running between being over-induced, so you're zonked out, under, you're in pain, and there was this little window in between this two extreme, which was comfort. This allowed the patient to maintain his own level of comfort. But it was very scary because it was concerned, will they over-infuse, will they kill themselves? So they had us do it, figuring, they're expendable. Little guys over there, we can do it. So we did it, and it turned into a very lucrative division of their company, which they later sold off to I believe it was Baxter Industries in Chicago. But that's how invention got going, and it just got in our blood, and we became good at it. We became sort of a think tank, and we would suddenly, every 2 or 3 weeks, we'd sit down in front of a conference room, a table, pull out some pizza, and talk about products. And in talking about products, of course, somewhere in the late 80s, someone said, why don't we do a camcorder for kids? And that's where it all started from.
And then who came to who?
Because we had an idea, but frankly, ideas like this need to be funded. And most important, they need to be commercialized. Someone has to manufacture them, someone has to sell and distribute them. We don't do that. I'll tell you that that's where we're at our worst. But good ideas is where we're probably at our best. So we looked for companies, and very shortly we came to Fisher-Price because we liked them. We had a relationship with them. We had done some very special technology for them earlier on. And one of my friends had sold a company to them, and I thought they're great people. So we called them on the phone. And we said, we have this great technology, this neat product. We described very loosely what it was. And they said, meet with us in New York City. We want to see it. We want to talk about it. And we went to New York City on the prescribed day, met with them, and as I recall, their legal offices, sat down with them across the table. They looked at us rather blankly because we didn't have a big box. And I believe they were expecting us to bring a prototype of some wonderful device which would levitate across the table. And I simply gave them a piece of paper. And I sensed disappointment. And I described to them what the product was. And they said, gee, that really sounds interesting. Could we have some time together? So they kind of said, you guys go out and smoke some marijuana or whatever you want to do. And we want to think about this as serious people. And we came back 15 minutes later, and they basically said, we want to license it. We love it. We think it's got wild potential. And then the disappointment set in. Here we are, this design engineering group, and we had just licensed to Fisher-Price this product, and Fisher-Price said, oh, well, we're going to have somebody else do the design and engineering for us. And we were a little crestfallen, but we said, okay, you're the boss, do what you think is best. And they came back to us a month later, much to our chagrin again, and said, we're giving your license back. We can't find anybody to do the engineering in this. They had gone apparently to Kodak, and Kodak had said it's going to take 3 years, maybe, could cost $5 million to develop. They had gone, I believe, to Polaroid. Polaroid said, we don't want to do this. They had gone around, including going to Sony, and Sony said, it simply technically can't be done. And they were going to give it back because our idea was years ahead of the time in their eyes. But I said that I didn't think so. Why didn't you ask us? We invented it. As I had said earlier, it was like being a married couple and somebody saying, okay, we're going to have kids now, and we're going to bring in the stud, and you sit back and watch. What? You know, I want the fun here. And the fun for us was developing it. So we basically put together a very tight contract, which they wanted because they were afraid now, having been rejected so many times, that it wouldn't work. And we developed a very strong, very business-like arrangement whereby we would develop the product based upon phases of activity with milestones along the way. We would be paid and compensated for reaching those milestones. And we got the contract, we signed it, went back to my people and said, well, what do you think? Can we do it? And everybody looked at me and said, well, I don't know, it's kind of tough. You know, it's really a tough project here. And I said, well, guys, we're going to do it because I've just signed up to it. And everybody said, okay, we'll do it. And actually, to their wonderful credit, they did just as they said. It was not easy, I'll tell you. To see the product all done, it's so easy to look at it and think, nothing there. But the work was, in some regards, revolutionary, and the team did an absolutely superb job with the project.
Let me just go back one sec. That was beautiful. Why didn't you insist immediately that, well, we can design it? Did you feel it would be interesting to see if these other companies could, or you were just, they're the boss, we don't want to ruffle things?
I think it was more, they're the boss, let them decide. I truly figured that any of the companies they went to would be able to do it, and probably would do a very wonderful job, and we would be consulting on it. The objective was to get the product into the marketplace quickly. They had a very aggressive schedule. I appreciated that, and I felt that probably for their comfort level, getting some results was desirable. So I didn't argue with them about it.
Okay. So let's go into the technical things before we go into the marketing. Is it basically security cam technology?
No, it is not.
Oh my God.
No, a security camera didn't exist at that time.
You're kidding.
I'm serious.
So my rap is all wrong.
Yeah, this was.
Please correct me.
This was not. Security cameras actually probably evolved at the same time or a little bit later than the Pixel. And the reason is this: security cameras, by their definition, are high resolution, very high resolution. In a bank environment, as an example, The spec for a bank is you have to be able to read a quarter at, I think it's 10 feet. Well, the pixel camera wouldn't read a quarter. Matter of fact, it may just read a white blob, which would be 3 pixels at that level. So it was imaging technology, but it was not security technology, and that wasn't really where we got our inspiration. What had happened was we had heard about a company in Scotland that had developed a new imaging. I'm sorry, let me take that back because I've just jumped ahead about 5 years and I got to get back in sync. We were looking at a very special camcorder, very expensive, and the question came up, how can we make this work? Because making the product do what we wanted was the key, record on audio tape. And when it got right down to it, the only way we could do it was with black and white, and the technology by calculation defined our pixel size, which was 60 by 90. And now we said, my God, 60 by 90 black and white, what sort of an image are we going to get from this thing? We were getting nervous. We had to simulate it on a computer, which we did. And these were in the olden days when simulating on a computer was not so easy. So we could see what the image looked like, and we could also show it to Fisher-Price Marketing, because they wanted to see everything every step of the way. The next step was find an imager, which is basically the CCD imager, presently used in the cameras we're using this very moment, but black and white. Who makes them? Who would make one custom for us? Nothing like that existed in the marketplace. We ended up going with a company called Sanyo in Japan. Sanyo was a major manufacturer of these imagers, and they agreed that they would make one custom for us, black and white, based on our specifications. Now, knowing that, we suddenly realized maybe there's a better relationship here, and Sanyo ultimately became the manufacturing partner to the product. But the imaging technology itself really didn't spring from security cameras. It literally was derived by the requirements that the technology had to have in order to record on standard conventional audio tape.
I see. So how about, the wrap has always been, I'm glad you can clarify all these wraps for me so I don't misinform anymore. The wrap has been, Pixel has 2,000 dots, and the TV we normally watch has 200,000 dots. Talk about that and clarify what 60 times 90 or 60 by 90 means.
Well,
dots?
Those are dots. Now, how does this work? Think of it as a series of dots on a wall. Each of those little dots is a particular size. It's a square, actually, and it's on silicon. This is on a little silicon wafer, which is about the size of your fingernail, maybe a little bit smaller. And those dots are photosensitive. They each individually will record the amount of light that comes to them. A television screen operates on a very different principle. It's called raster scanning. It scans horizontally, left and right, across the screen very quickly. A beam shoots an electronic beam across and then down. What we had to do was to take the signal we had and convert it to a signal, an image, which could be translated on and stored onto conventional tape. And then from the tape, output in a format which could be easily extrapolated and would now go on a television screen. So it was not an easy task. It was very complex.
Are we seeing approximately 2,000 dots and that's why it's called Pixel 2000?
No. Pixel 2000 really had nothing to do with it. I don't know where the name 2000 came from. It was a Fisher-Price name. We called it Pixel. That was our pet name for it.
They added the 2000.
They added the name 2000. If they probably had seen Kubrick at the time, it would have been 2001, A Pixel Odyssey. It could have been 1984, but it wasn't.
Was this development in 86-ish?
We were developing this about 86, 87, yeah.
But to go back a hair, if I say it's like security cam technology, is that still wrong?
I think that's a fair thing to say. It is like it.
Okay. If I say it's like or it's approximate, you're seeing 2,000 dots as opposed to 200,000 dots?
Yes.
God, this is good.
Yeah. And if you want the number of dots, if you got a calculator, just calculate it out.
You just multiply 60 times 90?
You do it in your head.
And that's how many dots you're seeing in Pixel?
That's correct. Each one of those is its own little photosensitive device. It can register approximately 8 levels of gray, from black to white, and 6 levels in the middle.
Okay, how about infinity focus? Is it indeed an infinity focus camera?
Well, it is. Now, it uses a very special type of lens. The lens was developed by a group in Boston, a group called Opticos. And they did a brilliant job developing a special little injection molded lens, which is a special aspheric lens. Very inexpensive to make, very precise, and very wonderful in that it can focus from 1/8 of an inch to infinity automatically. You don't have to touch a thing. You just point your camera and there it is.
Is infinity focus not available on professional bought cameras?
Well, there's a difference between automatic focus and infinity focus. As an example, normally most cameras we have two ways to focus, automatic focus, where it uses a range finding approach to focus on the object it's looking at, and it will do this automatically. Our camera doesn't do that. We have nothing in there that focuses. It is just the lens, and it focuses like a very, very wide angle lens would from a very close range to an infinity.
This is a plastic lens.
This is a simple plastic lens.
Everything's plastic in there.
Yes.
Is it Michael O'Reilly supposedly popped the glue off and focused it?
Yes, because the lens is set at focus at the factory. The lens actually sits in a barrel. The barrel is threaded to a light box that goes over what's called the imaging device. That's a piece of silicone with all the little dots in it. It has to be light tight. The lens is focused in and out until we get to what we call a prime focus. At that point, it should be glued in place, and usually a little bit of glue is put on it, and that's it. Now it's a perfect focus. That's initially setting the focus. Once it's set, it will focus by itself from 1/8 of an inch to infinity. Up until then, it will be a blurry image, which will focus from 1/8 of an inch to infinity.
So it is possible to pop the glue and focus.
Yes.
Why does it beep when you get to the end of the cassette?
Because it's telling you that it's at the end of the cassette.
That's the only reason.
Only purpose.
Now, a funny thing happens is many people, in my case, I would take the audio cassette, run it to the end, and then shoot directly into my VHS machine. Then there's no sound of the cassette moving because it's at the end of the cassette. And that beeping sound would happen randomly, anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. Is there a timing device, or what, that always amazed us how it did random?
No idea. Don't have a clue what it's doing.
Wow! But what is beeping in there? Is there a little beeper?
There's a little transducer that'll beep.
That'll beep.
Yeah.
And one of our most favorite items of Pixel Vision is the rip page or torn page ending. So you get, when you're taping on an audio cassette, you get to the end of the audio cassette and you get a random rip page. How in the heck did you ever get it to be random rip?
Well, we didn't do anything. It just happened that way.
Wait, you might repeat the question in that regard. Say the random rip page.
Well, the random rip page was just that. It was a random happening. We didn't control it. We didn't know what to do about it. There it was. What happened was, once we ran out of tape, the memory inside the little pixel had nothing more. It stopped there. And it stopped with exactly what it saw, which may have been half a frame, a quarter of a frame, a full frame, and it just froze at that point. That was the last image that came out, and it wasn't refreshing itself anymore in that it was getting more imaging, so it just stopped at that point.
That is a truly phenomenon. If I can ever show you, if you ever can see James Benning, who's a famous underground filmmaker, Sadie's dad.
Yes.
Have you ever seen Tabletop?
I never have, no.
It's only end shots. The whole 3-minute film is the rips. And it's him on a tabletop rolling pencils and cutting paper.
That's interesting.
So it's like the most, when you have something that's inherent to its own thing, it's the most only pixel ever made, pixel short made, because it's only there because of that unexplained phenomenon.
That's interesting. Well, wouldn't it be interesting to have the soundtrack too, of that last moment, and then the next 10 seconds after that, when people realize what's happened, to see how they react. You can't do that, of course, because once the tape is stopped, it's stopped. It's not recording anything. But it'd be interesting to hear those final moments, like the person's death cry, and he realizes he's out of tape, and this is what he's got.
And you know what else it does? It reflects that 16 millimeter avant-garde films. The first avant-garde film I ever saw was Andy Warhol, and it's called Blowjob, and all it is a guy's face, and every once in a while his head goes up like he's coming, but you don't see anything explicit, but you see the ends of the reels on 16 millimeter film have those white dots.
Right.
So you just see the white dots, and it's like you've brought that back so beautifully with that. And
well,
it's a random.
I'll tell you, you'd like to think that we brought it back, but some things about the Pixel happened by themselves. And the mere fact that they have been allowed to exist is rather wonderful. And I think that in some regards, that those strange things which we thought were defects that we'll let stay in because we really can't get the bloody things out, have become endearing to it and have sort of developed a life of their own. So while it may appear that we did it deliberately, some things we didn't do deliberately. And I've always liked that aspect, but I've always been afraid that marketing people would look at it and be very concerned because they want to be in total control and want the product to do things which are totally predictable, repeatable, and replaceable. And Pixel doesn't do that. Pixel, in some regards, does have a little mind of its own.
Indeed. There's another one that Mike, the San Francisco little techno guy, told me that no one ever says, is there's no video camera that starts immediately. Anything you hit, there's a few moments for it to engage. Pixel is the only one that start. That's just, is that a...
Well, the rapid starting of Pixel is something I really, since you mentioned it, I have not really had thought about it before. It probably does, because it's designed around really audio tape technology, and audio tape isn't designed to sit there and wait. You press the button, and it's all direct. If you look inside of Pixel, it's all mechanically interconnected with those buttons. There are no electronic lags or delays. You press the button, and it's running. The moment the tape runs, it's going.
Now, to go, when bypassing cassette, beat time varies. Okay, glitch, we did that. Why the pause button on the handle? Or what exactly do you call the button on the handle?
That is a pause button.
Okay.
And there's obviously a very good reason for a pause. When you're filming, especially when you're filming cassette, you don't have a lot of time. And we felt kids needed time to get set up, they needed time to get their act together and then go ahead and do it. So the pause is just that. It's ready to go, and now you can control the whole thing with a simple button on the handle.
Right. Essentially, it's a start or stop button, the pause button. And the other decision the filmmaker has with Pixel Vision is highlight or low light. The funny thing with whenever I shot was I would always check that at the end after I shot. You never think of it. I mean, eventually you realize when there's this cloudy thing. Now, maybe you can discuss if indeed, do you call the blue chip, or do you call it something else?
I'm not certain what the blue chip is.
The blue chip is the thing that fogs up that everybody pops out of their camera. Well, here's what I maybe I could. You could talk about the filter on the lens a little if you want, and then I'll go into the blue chip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there is a filter that's over the lens. That is actually an infrared filter. Now, the reason is this. If you take that off, you'll be shocked to find that Pixel will video literally in the dark. It is that sensitive to infrared. We put an infrared filter on because there's infrared radiation in sunlight. And out of doors, it would actually just overpower the imager. It would make it just wash out and go white. And think about this at high altitude, going to, say, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Denver, where the base elevation is perhaps 7,000 feet or worse. Far more infrared at that particular altitude. Therefore, we have two things. We have a built-in infrared filter, which goes right across the lens inside the camera. And then we have the rotating filter on the outside, which is a neutral density filter. The purpose for that was when you go to high altitudes, there is still too much infrared. And you basically flip that to reduce the amount of light coming into the camera because it'll give it'll make the imager a little bit happier.
Only high altitude or just bright sunlight?
No, we used it primarily in high altitude, but I can tell you it probably has its place in very bright sunlight as well.
Oh yeah, because the phenomenon is you can't see what you're going to get when you're shooting pixel. So if you're in high light, you're sort of just praying whether you want to use the filter or not. Right. What did you call the ring filter that you?
Neutral density.
The neutral density filter. Now the infrared filter, which we've referred to as the blue chip, because many of us who got the cameras at Toys R Us for $100 in the say 87, 89 range, we would, after 5 years maybe, or in some amount of time, we're told this, that little blue chip, that infrared filter, emits a gas. That gas fogs up the filter, and your picture is blurred. So we were told you unscrew 6 screws, you take a safety pin and you pop it out. In essence, you just break the blue. We're also told that you can take it and clean it with alcohol and put it back in, but it's so hard to do that one person said all you do is pop the blue chip out, and you take a piece of unexposed film and you put it on the end, if indeed you think you need that filter. Now, what I just said is true or false, or can you elaborate on the infrared filter?
Well, the infrared filter and its tendency to become foggy is actually caused by the plastic around it. Plastic is composed of a lot of chemicals, and over time it outgasses. That is to say, the chemicals come into the atmosphere. Prime example is the inside of your automobile. You'll notice every now and then you get into your car and you say, what is this film on the inside of my car? It's on the windshield. I got to clean the windshield now. What is this stuff? That is plasticizers coming out of all the plastic within inside your car. And pixel vision, same scenario. It's all plastic that goes around that imaging device and holds the lens. That plastic over time begins to outgas. The outgas are little chemicals. They get onto the lens. They will get onto the filter, and they will create all sorts of fuzziness and problems. They need to be cleaned off. So normally what's done is the filter is removed, cleaned, and put back in, but you have to have Asian dexterity to do this. The average guy clunking around with his large fingers and the lack of dexterity is going to have a lot of trouble putting it back in. Some people leave it off. If you leave it off, that's fine. Except remember, when you use it out of doors, the camera will be far more sensitive than it otherwise would be because it's now seeing a lot more infrared.
Far more sensitive to that bright sunlight.
That's correct.
That's right. It's not. It doesn't have anything to do with your skin color.
It has nothing to do with that. It's looking for sources of infrared, and I'll give you an example. If you light a match or a cigarette lighter in front of it, suddenly the whole screen will blossom white as that match flares up. And the match will not be a flame, it will be this white orb hanging over top of it. That's a good indication that you're getting infrared oversaturation. And that's fairly common with a pixel filter removed.
Now, if you take it out, you said it's okay. Do you think that putting a piece of unused film in front is serving the same purpose as the infrared filter?
No, putting unexposed film in front will not do the same thing. That's acting as a neutral density filter.
Is there anything you can use to replace the infrared filter on the end of on the lens itself?
I am certain that there are other infrared filters available, and I think companies such as, one example, Edmund Scientific, would probably have some sheet of, I'll say, a mylar-like material which would do the job. A blue filter tends to filter red. Will it truly filter infrared well? I can't give you an answer, but I can tell you that a call to Edmunds or looking through the catalog will give you a very quick solution, I think, to that problem. That's
great, Jim. It's funny because in the pixel vision world, it's called the blue chip, and it's really an infrared.
Well, it's called the blue chip because it's blue in color, right. and the blue basically absorbs the red, giving you, by the way, higher contrast.
Maybe you could repeat that and say that what's often referred to as the blue chip is, so he could use that.
Well, what is often referred to as the blue chip is actually an infrared filter, and the blue color is because the blue spectrum absorbs the red spectrum when it comes through, and this is formulated in such a way that it absorbs a lot of the infrared end of that red spectrum, which is sort of the far end of the infrared spectrum.
Very good. Now, here's a funny aesthetic question, since now that being the inventor of the camera, you've been able to see where it went, and artists are using it, or filmmakers are using it. What do you think of the purists who don't want to take their blue chip out and then the picture's just foggy? I mean, I accept them by festival and I go, wow, it's great. There's some they're not all looking the same, and people are like staring at the screen and it's like, this is really bad. Or have you ever noticed how every photograph almost in pixel articles in newspapers and magazines don't capture the sharpness of pixel? They all look like they have the blue chip in.
The sharpness of the pixel in the blue chip is really kind of funny, because I have seen a lot of images which are very blurry, and I know the pixel can be sharp as a tack. So I have to look at it philosophically. I suppose if they want to be that way, that's fine. Frankly, I used to smear Vaseline on the lens of my camera and go around and photograph with it too. It's all a matter of what they're willing to put up with. If they feel they can make an artistic statement or a proper statement with it that way, that's fine. But frankly, if I had a lot of dust and debris on the lens of my Nikon, I probably want to clean it off, because I want to deal with the reality that the Nikon can provide me technically, as opposed to something artificial which has gotten in the way of it. The problem is, I think most people are a little afraid and intimidated with the cameras to tamper with them, and that's totally understandable.
Totally, and also it's so valuable to them. It's their plastic toy, it's their pixel. They don't want to open it up because you have to almost break the black around the thing you look through, the black sort of liner. You almost have to break that, in most cases break it. But I like to talk about the phenomenon of how many people have invented something in the moving picture world, a 35 millimeter film camera or a Super 8, where it has what it's been referred to as a defect, but as referred to as something, like that. Actually, it's a question. Did you anticipate the gas would fog it up?
No, we didn't think it would ever last that long.
Right.
It was a toy. It would be gone in 3 years. It was like an old Ferrari automobile. They built these things to be destroyed. They were designed to be raced. They never thought they'd become icons later on. And suddenly they got to repair them, and it's all rusting away. And somebody says, they made the car terribly. No, they didn't. It was made to be eaten up and destroyed in racing. There's nothing older than a 2-year-old race car. There's nothing older than a 4-year-old toy.
Right. And so we always loved it. We said, the inventor, it was so perfect because they invented it and had a defect that you can fix in 2 minutes with a safety pin. How many 35 millimeter cameramen, they probably do have like little tricks. If you just put a piece of duct tape right here, you fix this whole thing that the camera inventor wasn't quite.
We did not anticipate the problem, and the fact that you can fix it is probably more a tribute to the way it was engineered for manufacture, because you can snap that cover on and off. And there were different permutations of that. Earlier designs didn't have it quite as easy. Later designs had a cover which snapped on and snapped off. That wasn't so you could get at it to clean it. That was so it would go together easier. There was a very selfish reason for it.
Go together easier, meaning
manufacturing.
The people who are making it.
Absolutely.
Right. Does the AC override batteries? In other words, if I have 6 batteries in there and I plug in the AC, is my batteries being worn out at the same time?
My recollection is no, they're not. The AC does take the place and cuts out the onboard batteries.
What is the lens size? You might have said that.
Well, lens size, and the physical size of the lens is about probably about 4 millimeters diameter, which is to be about probably about 0.16, 0.18, maybe a little bit more, maybe 0.2 of an inch in diameter. It has a focal length, of course, from 1/8 of an inch to infinity, and it has a viewing angle of 60 degrees. And those were the primary specifications for the lens.
Boy, there's other technical things, but I sort of would like to shift now, but we got 10 minutes. Maybe we'll stay on this and then go at the beginning. the next tape and go into the failure thing, so we can just sort of roll into that. Sorry. Okay. Can you adapt other lenses on it?
Not at all easily. This display, I should say this imaging device, is very small, almost in today's technology obsolete. And to adopt another lens to it would probably be strictly trial and error, because I can point to a lens and say this is definitely going to work. You would have to remove the old barrel from the lens, find a lens which is small enough in diameter, which has different characteristics, telephoto for example, which will screw down or be movable inside the barrel, which goes over top of the imaging device. And it would be a tough job, and it would be very time consuming.
Can you adapt a regular video camera to do infinity focus?
Yes.
You can. Okay.
And the way you do it really is you would remove the lens, and you would put on a special lens, which is a very wide angle aspheric lens. The problem is video cameras are color. Color correction becomes an important characteristic of a lens design when you're dealing with strictly a color imaging device. Ours was black and white. We didn't have to worry about color. So we can get away with what's called a single lens solution. When you go to color, you'll probably have to go to a multiple lens solution. And therefore, it becomes more difficult to get this, what we call infinity focusing. The infinity focusing may be somewhat different than what we have experienced with Pixel. It may be, it'll focus from 2 inches to infinity. It may not focus quite as close as the Pixel does.
You know, when I was trying to figure out in the talk what else Pixel is unique, there's some that are so evident we all forget them. It's using the cheapest tape of all videotape, and it's black and white. Are there any video cameras that were ever? Oh yeah, I guess Portapacks were black and white, just black and white. Early video cameras were black and white. Oh, that was dumb. Okay, what does the Pixel camera do that no other camera can do?
Well, recording on audio tape is probably the #1 characteristic. Recording on audio tape is the leading edge of the cause and effect that occurs to create all the things that we look at Pixel vision to be as unique, different, endearing, horrifying, etc.
Good answer. Dave Riddle, you know, the first Pixel repairman?
Yes.
Yeah. What he says, what do these modifications, why would you ever want to do these modifications? Why don't you just get a camera that can do these things? How do you respond to that statement?
Well, how does one replace Pixel vision without doing all the repairs and modifications? The only point being that there really isn't a camera out there that does what Pixel vision does in terms of the image quality. And by the way, quality isn't necessarily a word to say it's good. Image quality may define the fact that it's very poor or grainy or harsh. No one has been foolish enough to build a camera quite as bad as that since, and therefore it's very hard to replace it with something which is otherwise available. Everyone's going on to bigger and better things, and I suppose Pixel vision, like the Tyrannosaurus, has sort of remained behind as a living fossil to a time and a place when technology drove invention to this level of madness. And this is the sort of thing which creative people love to grab onto. Find a creative person. You will not find him driving around in a new Lexus. He'll probably have some old crapped out MG or a Peugeot or a Matra Duget or some such weird thing, because it's a reflection of his personality. He is different, he is unique, he's special, and he doesn't say he's great, he just says, I'm me. And the Pixel basically is an I'm me camera. You love me or you hate me. And maybe some little things in between, but it's like a French woman. They don't have to be beautiful to have their own aura. And you either like it or you don't.
Wow, that's poetry, dude. That was beautiful. Let's see.
I think we should just switch tapes.
You want to just switch tapes now?
Yeah.
Is that all right with you?
That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Beautiful, man. You're doing great. So I can't really, I'll say it's like secure. Maybe I do say it's like security cam technology because I'm just trying to relate it to them.
Of course.
That's
sure.
okay. But saying 2000 DOP versus
Criticism and concern at Fisher-Price's end, and we convinced them that these were great features. The kids loved them. In fact, his kids did love them.
how much did Fisher-Price talk to you during the inventing? Did you basically, you showed them the one page, they said go for it, and then you showed them the finished product. How much did they dictate and say, we got to change this because it's going to cost us too much in that?
Fisher-Price was very proactive in the design. They didn't come in and say you have to change it because of cost. Basically, the marketing people needed to see and understand what it was we're giving them. This is just good communication. But the problem was we had nothing to show them because we're still developing. So we had to simulate a lot of the imaging, the grayscale, how many levels of gray we had, the number of pixels, the frame that we've talked to about the around the perimeter of the image when it's on a screen. All these things, they were part of the decision-making process. The fact is we kind of told them what had to be done, and we used the excuse technically we can't do anything else to get us out of an argument. But they were very proactive in the project in terms of giving marketing input. And the fact is, frankly, they don't get enough credit for what they did because this was very brave of them to get involved in this sort of a project. And I thought that their ability to give us latitude to not only develop it, but to recommend a company who they have heard of but had never worked with before in Japan to make it was very gutsy. It's a company which was at its peak of creativity. And they basically were kind enough to extend that creativity to cover our efforts as well.
Who came up with the color scheme, especially the blue lines?
The blue lines. Sorry, I don't.
On the plastic camera,
Oh.
the plastic gray. There's the the logo on the side, PXL-2000, and then there's a blue line.
I don't know whether that was them or us. We did industrial design. They did industrial design because they have got a very good design team up there. We implemented it and did the production drawings and made the whole product manufacturable at our end. But whether they came up with that or not, I don't recall.
So here you invent and come up with 6 prototypes that you go to a toy fair with.
Yeah, actually, the prototypes we built, I think there were 10.
10.
Yeah.
You go there, how much do they resemble what we have as pixel cameras?
You would not be able to tell them apart. They were that close.
They were that close.
They were that close.
Were they gray and everything?
Absolutely, they were just like production. And I don't believe I even have one around. I think I may have bits and pieces of plastic from them, but that plastic was not molded. We cast that plastic using a very special epoxy casting technique. We didn't have parts off the tooling at that point. Everything was made almost by hand.
And tell us about the fair. Did you go to the fair?
I went to the fair, yes.
What kind of excitement was in the air? Describe what the reactions were and who was looking at them. Just toy store buyers or?
Well, the New York Toy Fair is normally held end of January, early February of every year. This particular year, Fisher-Price announced the camera, and they announced it to a very excited buying populace. The show was composed of a little bit of everybody. Inventors were there, buyers were there, mom and pop store buyers were there, big chain buyers were there, Toys R Us, Walmart, Kmart, Sears and Roebuck. And they would all come to the various participants, Fisher-Price being one, to see their wares, to see what they wanted to buy. And Fisher-Price had set up a room with pixel cameras where, as I recall, people could go in and they would be recorded on the pixel camera and they would have a videotape to look at or even take home. And Fisher-Price came rushing up to me as we came into the facility because I brought 2 of the engineers in who were involved. I said, "You will not believe who was just going through the show." I said, "Who?" They said, 6 engineers from Sony. Because Sony had been asked if they could do the job, and Sony had said, no, it's impossible to do. So Sony was one of the first groups to go through to actually see it actually having occurred.
Well, now we're going to go into why you think it failed, why other people think it failed, and one of the rumors was that it failed because Sony hijacked it because they were about to come out with a portable camcorder, and they didn't want this around. Have you ever heard that theory?
I've heard that. Matter of fact,
can you respond to that one?
I received an email on that theory a couple weeks ago, which is the first I'd heard of it. Now, this is sort of like little green men came down and carried them off. That wasn't the case. Sony really had no involvement. Sony has never been in touch with us. Sony had no ownership in the technology at all. If anything, maybe it was the other way around, as time would point out. Sony had no involvement at all in the project, and we never heard from Sony during or after regarding it. The technology was strictly unique. It was patented, and we owned the patents on it, and it was like nothing else out there at that particular time.
Right. And so, why did Pixel 2000 fail?
Well, is it true to say that it failed?
Right.
Let's take a look at that. Pixel 2000, as a product that was selling, was gaining in sales all the time. One of the problems with Pixel was cost. Initially, when they brought out Pixel, we only had a limited number to introduce, and Fisher-Price chose to introduce them in a very high dollar and cents format. They sold it with a monitor, they sold it with cartridges, with a carrying case in a big box, and they sold it for, I think the initial price, if I recall, was $179. A lot of money, considering our target had been $99 retail price for the camera alone. And then as time went on, they lowered the price because there was some resistance for a product like that costly, and got down to about $129 for the camera alone. But they were experiencing a rather interesting phenomena. And we hear it on the radio or the news all the time today when we hear about the Japanese yen is 122 to the dollar. That's now. Then the Japanese yen was 220 to the dollar. 220 yen equaled $1. Fisher-Price set up a deal with Sanyo whereby they bought the camera in not US dollars but Japanese yen. Wonderful. They've got Japanese yen. Now what do? You got to change it to greenback dollars. Rate of exchange is applied, and suddenly, hey, if that yen is getting strong, which is no longer 220, it's like suddenly 200 to the dollar, I'm getting less money for it. I'm paying more. It's costing me more money to make it. So what do? They go back to Toys R Us, the companies are selling, and say, we have to up the price. And Toys R Us said, not in your life, bro. This is much too expensive to begin with. We're looking for that $99 item out here. We'll sell the life out of it. Well, Fisher-Price, I'm certain, bit their lip, absorbed the cost. It got to a point where they said, look, we can't do it anymore. They went back to the companies and said, you got to help us. Fisher-Price was given slightly better margins on their sales to Toys R Us, which was the predominant toy store selling it, to sort of make up their losses. And to reach the point in about a year and a half when the yen was getting, suddenly it was reaching its, approaching that time when it was beginning to really get strong. Eventually it became, I think it was like 98 yen to the dollar over a long distance of time. But during the life of the Pixel, it probably got down to 180. But that was enough to really cause the price to jump, or cause Fisher-Price to pay more money for it. And it reached a point where they basically just decided, we're not making enough money with this. We've made our statement, it's done its thing. This is a dollars and cents business, and we have a boss. They were owned by another company, Quaker Oats. They decided to simply discontinue it. So is it fair to say that it failed? Because I must tell you, its dying sales price was $99. And I received a phone call from Fisher-Price telling us that the product was going to be sold for $99. I called Toys R Us stores, of which there were 3 around me, and it was already had just been introduced at $99. I went to the one store to buy 4 or 5. They just sold out. I went rushing to the other store. I knew that they had 4 or 5 because we called to see what their stock was. They had 2 left. I grabbed them. At $99, I don't know whether it's fair to say they jumped off the shelf, but at that target price, which is what we'd always aimed for to begin with, suddenly they were selling like wildfire. But the fact of the matter is, there were no more to sell because that was the end of production from Fisher-Price's standpoint. So I'll tell you, was it a failure? perhaps. They sold a number of them, perhaps around 400,000. I think that in terms of a toy and its potential, it failed to meet the volume expectations that everyone had. On the other hand, I think that as a product, it probably was successful. But there was another success which was not at all clearly understood, was never talked about, but I was part of it, so I can explain it. And frankly, enough time has gone by, it's certainly not going to make anyone upset. Fisher-Price was owned by Quaker Oats. Quaker Oats is a food company, it is not a toy company. Quaker Oats made it very clear from the outset that they did not understand Fisher-Price's business, that they wanted to have a product which was not a toy product per se, it was not a toddler or infant product, it addressed an older group. They wanted Fisher-Price to be able to sell not just to infants and to toys and kids and toddlers, but to sell to a much older group, even going up to teenage. And if you look at the styling of the product, grays, it looks like mom and dad's camcorder. It is very somber compared to the very colorful products of a Fisher-Price genre. So there was a plan already to market-wise change drastically from what Fisher-Price was used to. And there was something else which I didn't appreciate. Quaker Oats was desirous of selling Fisher-Price. They were a food company. They did not understand the toy industry, yet they respected Fisher-Price because they were literally a household name. But one year Fisher-Price would make a lot of money, one year they didn't, depending upon how people responded to products. And they were very hopeful that this would provide higher publicity for Fisher-Price, making it more saleable as a company spin-off. Therefore, Fisher-Price had been encouraged to do this whole product by their boss, their parent company, Quaker Oats. And in terms of it selling off the company over a short period of time, yes, that happened. Fisher-Price was sold. Was Pixel responsible? I wouldn't want to take credit for that. I don't think that's true, but it certainly pointed to a desire to do this. So once it had fulfilled its hidden agenda, it was no longer useful to Quaker Oats. It wasn't making money for Fisher-Price, and Fisher-Price was being pressed by Quaker Oats to be more profitable. It was I think a calculated retreat from the market.
One thing you said was there were 400,000 sold. Do you think that's how many were made?
Well, maybe. I don't have the exact numbers because when they sold them off, they did so at what they called below their cost, so we didn't really get an accurate statement as to how many were sold. I believe they made around 400,000. How many were actually sold? I don't know, but I do know that they didn't have any inventory in about a 6-month period of time.
After they ceased.
Yeah, and I don't believe it was because they were destroyed. I believe that they were probably sold off.
Right, because you could call after '89 and say, do you have another camera in the back room or something? And sometimes they would sell them.
Yeah.
And Jim, this is a long shot, but how many cameras do you think exist today?
I really don't have much of a clue. Realizing it was a toy product, realizing that it was an obsolete product, or at least not being used probably 4 or 5 years after it was discontinued, I would have to guess maybe 1/3 of them, maybe a quarter, exist today versus what was ultimately produced. I think a lot of them became landfill and other, the normal fate of a toy that's no longer being used.
And could you discuss marketing versus kids accepting them? It was basically, who was it exactly designed for? Do you think kids were actually, as I often use in my rap, saying, this is black and white, it's got not great sound, Johnny down the street has a color video camera, and it has good sound. So can you discuss their marketing, versus or in relationship to kids actually?
Sure. Well, when it comes to the marketing of a product, a company like Fisher-Price is very savvy onto how to research products, and they do things like focus studies, where they bring kids in, they show them emulators, they show them what the product's to be, and get their reaction. The reaction was probably quite reasonably good. Remember, this time, a youngster could not easily buy a color camcorder unless he walked off with mom and dad's, which was an expensive proposition. So would a youngster say, yeah, I've really got to have that color one down the street? Maybe, if he was from a very well-to-do family. But most families didn't have camcorders, much less expensive ones to give to the youngsters. How did the youngsters respond to black and white? Well, for the most part, it seemed to be okay. Whether it was ultimately that well received, it's very hard for me to say, because once the product goes in the market, in some regards, we begin to lose contact very quickly with the product, the market, and what's going on. Our job is done. It's in the hands of manufacturing. We sit back and we collect royalty checks. Maybe we get good communication from the manufacturer. Maybe we don't. But for the most part, the reception seemed to have started very well. The problem was most people didn't even know of its existence. Here was a product that appeared on the shelves without a commercial to support it, yet a commercial was done. Nobody knew it existed. Nobody knew what to do. And this was driving Toys R Us, who was a major distributor of this camera, crazy. And they came up with a very bright idea, very simple. They put a camera in a glass case, pointed it upward at people walking by. They had the monitor alongside. As people walked by, they saw themselves in the monitor. They looked. There was a little sign, and suddenly their interest was piqued. And they started to sell the cameras that way. But there was no rollout of commercials to support it, to educate people that this product existed.
Do you have any print ads?
I have videotapes of the commercial.
Of the 1 30-second commercial?
Correct.
What do you think of that commercial?
I happen to like the commercial. I thought they did a very good job. I thought it was creative. In a very short period of seconds, it captured to me the essence of the camera, which was creativity, kids having fun together, and kids communicating. And that to me was what the camera was about. Fisher-Price understood the camera perfectly. They had a wonderful feel for the camera. Why they didn't get it into a better distribution, why they didn't have a good commercial ongoing for it, I could only really speculate. I don't know.
Did you have anything to do with the TV commercial?
We had nothing to do with it.
Let me tell you, I study advertising because of my studies of Marshall McLuhan. There is a phenomenon in that commercial that I've been trying to get across in all these interviews all these years, that it's an audio cassette. And when you pull an audio cassette of that, people just don't get it because they don't see it's an audio cassette. They just see it, but it's not like distinguishable unless you like hold it up. That commercial, that guy who directed that had that kid flip that right when they're saying, you've been seen, or no, you've been heard, now you can be seen. And the way he has the kid flip the tape and slap it in there, that was brilliant.
I liked the commercial very much. When I first saw it, I was really impressed because it captured to me the essence of what we thought the camera should be. And the mere fact that it wasn't aired, I thought, was not helpful to the camera. But I can also speculate on why they didn't air it. And I think, frankly, they were a little nervous about the camera because this is a very high-tech product for what it's doing. It had never been done before. Remember, we're not doing something which has been done previously by many companies. Never occurred before. And they were nervous that they were going to have problems with it. They weren't certain about how many pieces they would get in production. So I think they ramped up to the product very, very slowly. And maybe that became a culture to the product. Not promoting it. It became almost an underground product that they were producing. Many people involved in decisions like this, higher level management within a company, tends not to share it with people on the outside. So I don't know really what the motivation was.
Now, even though this writer the other night said she remembers seeing this, you know for certain, you have proof it never aired.
Well, I heard someone say that they had seen it on a Cablevision program or something. The Cablevision didn't exist then. But they saw it late at night, someone said. We contacted Fisher-Price to see when it was being shown. There was nothing.
They told you we don't show it.
Well, I don't recall exactly what was said, but the bottom line was, if it was shown at all, it was very, very sparse.
How about print ads, magazines, or newspapers? Do you have any of those?
I have none of those.
So do you know if any exist?
I believe that some may have existed. I saw very little that I can recall. And the mere fact that we have no cut sheets from that indicates to me that very little was done. Because normally we receive that information, that press, and we keep it in a scrapbook.
Right. You brought up another idea, was repair, because they had the 800 hotline. you could call when your pixel camera went haywire. And indeed, I shot a shoot with Pixel once where I was going like this, and I shorted the cord out. And this was after '89. I says, can I buy a new adapter cord? And they said yes. And I just said, got any cameras left? And they go, yeah, we just have about 30 in the back room. And I immediately called all my friends who wanted them, and one person got 3, and somehow the other 27. But there was some, in some, one of the Pixel articles, which I've tried to collect every one, it says Fisher-Price would say, just send it in and we'll fix it. And they would often junk them and send them a new one.
Sometimes. They actually had a technician from the Sanyo Corporation there who was doing the repairs. And some could be repaired, but you know, the labor becomes so intense after a while, it's easier to forget it and to give them a new camera. In some cases, a camera which was considered defective would go back to Sanyo for credit or for repair or replacement.
It works. Jay Hoberman in Premiere Magazine said 2 funny things. He says it works best when plugged into a wall socket, a wall outlet. That's just a freaky statement. Now, he's a film critic. You would think, how priority was it making it portable? Was that like, boom, one of the top? Because you got Tyco Kitty Cam coming out, not portable.
Well, for us, having a portable camcorder was essential because kids are not going to be tied to a power line. This means they're tied to the house. They're not going to take a die-hard battery with them. They need something which will operate on batteries. So making it operate on batteries was absolutely critical. But at the same time, for those instances when they were at home and wanted to, an AC adapter, in other words, plugging into your wall, was certainly the way to go. Because batteries only last so long, and I don't even recall the life we were getting with Pixel with its 6 batteries. But if you look at the handle was totally hollow, filled to the capacity with batteries, and we put them in the handle because it also creates a lower center of gravity for the camera, so it was ergonomically easier to work with. Made the handle rather fat. Fat handle's easier to hold.
It's got a great feel. I think it's just brilliant. We're sort of leaning towards back into a few technical things, unless you have any other comments on marketing and kids acceptance, any other ideas that we missed there?
No, I don't think so. I think one thing that maybe we did miss, maybe you're going to talk about later, is this whole thing called auto-irising.
Oh, that's on my list, so go and dive into it. Tell us what auto-irising is, who put it in the Pixel camera, and why.
Auto-irising is a very interesting technique. Normally when you iris, it is basically reducing the amount of light to the lens. You reduce the amount of light to the lens normally with a manual adjustment. Some cameras today do it automatically, but there was no easy way to do it. We developed a technique of electronically sampling each little dot and then saying, is this within is this within a value range which we had predetermined, and if not, we would iris it down. In other words, we'd reduce, we'll call it the amount of energy going to it. So what we got was effectively always adjusting for changes in light which occurred within the shooting environment. If you pointed at the light, an overhead fluorescent fixture, it would iris down. You'd see the bulbs individually. If you pointed at an incandescent light, it would iris down like you're putting neutral density filters over to reduce the amount of light, and you could see into the bulb. Yet I could shoot under a couch, and suddenly it was as though everything was removed, and I suddenly could see almost in the dark. This technique was fairly unique, and we developed it really on our own with some association with Sanyo, Sanyo Engineering. But it was quite unique to our camera, and it's part of our patent. And it's one of the first cameras in the United States and not the world that used this technology. The technology was later adopted very quickly by Sanyo and adopted by companies such as Sony, who saw the Sanyo product and copied it. And soon it became almost an industry standard, which was soon improved upon and greatly changed as technology increased. But surprisingly, auto-irising is part of our patent, and I suppose had I gone to the Japanese who had copied it and said, excuse me, but you owe me a royalty, you would be interviewing me on my island with dancing girls around in my private jet sitting on the airport runway, because that's how valuable it was. But frankly, I guess in our stupid youth, we didn't care about those things, and our attitude was, well, let Sanyo use it. They were kind enough to work so hard on this project, not realizing it would become itself an icon, and not realizing its ultimate worth. Our attitude was, let the world have it.
That's called auto-irising.
That's called auto-irising, yes.
You basically invented auto-irising?
Our company did, yes. Our
You
engineers
invented
did.
auto-irising. So, indeed, with the Pixel camera, you license it, which means you get a royalty on what was sold.
That's correct.
But if you didn't license it, you're just a one-off. You do a job and you get paid.
That's correct, if you just do it on a contract basis.
Then since you license the camera, aren't you indeed licensing auto-irising?
We did a license auto-irising, but our licensing arrangement was with Fisher-Price.
Oh.
Not with the
so
manufacturer.
They're not getting it. Who's getting the money on inventing auto-irising?
Well, no one. And by the way, let me just make a correction. I called it auto-irising. It's probably unfair to call it that. It's called really electronic irising. Because auto-irising could also be done mechanically. But electronic irising would be the proper term. No, actually, well, it's a strange scenario. It's like who has the who's got the dice. We owned the technology by patent. We licensed to Fisher-Price. Fisher-Price entered into a manufacturing agreement with Sanyo. Sanyo manufactured the product under license from Fisher-Price. Fisher-Price basically said, "You're our manufacturer. We will let you make the product strictly for us." When the license was terminated, it reverted back to us. Therefore, now we control the license. Royalties are paid to us under any circumstances. Fisher-Price only had the right to sublicense it if they were to sell it offshore. In other words, if they sold the camera in Asia or in Europe and they in turn sublicensed it to someone else to make, they would receive a royalty. We would receive half of that royalty. That's how the arrangement was. When it all reverted back to us, we owned everything. It was also then ours to enforce. And when we saw that Sanyo was using our technology, we thought that Sanyo had done an absolutely splendid job on this camera. They had sacrificed a lot. They had put a lot of effort into it. I felt it was gentlemanly to let them use it and not to say too much. We did bring them in and talk about it, and they were resistant about paying us any licensing fee for it. And our attitude was, let's not make a big case out of this. They've been so good. Let's let them use it and say nothing. Hindsight, of course, I didn't realize that it was going to be copied by a lot of other companies too and used, and it would become almost the de facto standard for a period of time. Had we received 5% royalty on every one of those little de factos that was put out there, we probably would have made 10 times the amount of money we made with Pixel. But we didn't know, and it didn't seem like something to pursue at the time. Therefore, we ignored it, and to this day I bite my lip and say, nice guys finish last.
Beautiful. Now, could you talk about Sanyo? When did the Sanpix come out? Sanpix is the Japanese version of Pixel.
Sanpix is the Japanese version of Pixel. Now, Sanyo is a large company. It's composed of many different divisions. One of the divisions was a company called TPC, Tokyo Parts Corporation. Their claim to fame was they made bill changers, they had very good electromechanical capability, and they were the designated manufacturer and assembler of the camera as part of the Sanyo organization. That division, just after Fisher-Price discontinued it, decided that they would like the opportunity to sell it in Asia, exactly as Fisher-Price had it. They just changed the format from NTSC to, I think it was PAL, which they did themselves. So it would basically be very usable on televisions that are predominant in Asia. They use a different video format than we do here in the States. And that's what it was called. The same camera, identical to what we sold. They licensed the rights to do that from myself, and they did that for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then they decided there wasn't enough of a market for it in Japan as they expected, where they expected the dominant sales to be.
So you would say it was available from what to what?
I believe the Tokyo Parts Corporation sold it from probably 1989 or 90 to probably 1992 or 93.
And how many do you think they made?
I would be surprised if they made 50,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
I would say that they are probably quite scarce and quite rare.
And this guy, he bought one for $75.
Well, I would guess in terms of archival value, it's probably a very good bargain.
Jim, in the Village Voice, December 7, 1993, you said you're planning upgrades which include better resolution and longer tape playing time. Could talk about those two and then how color prototype came in.
Well, what happened was we were approached by a number of companies who wanted to take on the Pixel again. But they didn't want black and white. They didn't want short record time, and they wanted higher resolution. Well, at that time, we knew we could do the higher resolution and longer record time. Technology was there to do it. We knew how. Color was still rather a mystery. So we talked about that, but nothing ever came of it. Many companies wanted to, but few really had the wherewithal to make it happen. Later, we developed on our own a plan to do it in color as well, because we were being bombarded by companies who wanted to basically sell the product as a color product, still recording on audio tape. And one of them was Hasbro. And we entered into a contract with Hasbro, and we began to develop a color version of the Pixel technology, which we did. We developed it to a point where it was demonstratable. We could certainly show that it worked properly. We knew how to do it, and we knew how to implement it into production. So that's really where this started from. It wasn't a rumor, it was a fact. And over a period of time, we did develop a product, at least to a demonstration point, which would record on audio. Tape, full color. It had twice the resolution of the present Pixel. And it recorded, not longer, it actually recorded a shorter period of time.
So you mean it's been, instead of 7 minutes, 5 minutes per 45-minute side?
It would record on one side for, I believe it was about, I think it was about 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
In the lecture today, you said they would cost about $25 per camera to make.
If one was to make them today, the cost of that color camera would be probably around $25.
What would you foresee that selling in the market if it was, say, today?
$99.
Really?
The normal markup in the retail environment is about 4 times manufacturing cost. Some go to 5 times.
So you're saying a black and white Pixel camera from 87 to 89 costs $25 per to make?
If I was to do, when we did the original Pixel, the cost on it was about $30, manufacturing cost. That was the original Pixel. If I did one today, but made it full color, twice the resolution, and greatly improved, the manufacturing cost would be less, would probably be in the area of $25.
Why would you not just put out the black and white Pixel as it is again?
Well, frankly, I'd love to for selfish reasons, but basically the marketing people who we have spoken to didn't want that. They didn't want to reintroduce the same old Pixel. They wanted something new, better, and special. And this is why I have developed such a great respect, not just in hindsight, but prior to as well, for Fisher-Price, because they had the foresight to see what this could do, whereas other people don't have the foresight to understand what it can do. All they do is look at seeing something and they say, if this is 10 pounds, we need something which costs as much, which weighs 20 pounds. It has nothing to do with good marketing knowledge or skill. It has to do with just let's make it better and bigger.
Can you talk about the life of Pixel after, what you've seen happen to Pixel Vision?
Well, Pixel Vision sort of took on a life of its own, unbeknownst to us. We're a design and development company. After Pixel was off the market, we walked away from it. We were doing other things. We did blood chemistry analyzers for the veterinary marketplace. We did all sorts of other products. And we did a lot of inventions, and we licensed some products too. I didn't know much about what was going on with Pixel. As a matter of fact, I hadn't even thought about it until the phone rang one day. and it was a member of the New York Film Festival. This was, in of all things, the 90s. And they were saying, do you have any idea what has happened to pixel vision? And I said, is pixel vision our camera by some chance? We never called it pixel vision, it was just pixel. And they said, absolutely, Fisher-Price told us to get in touch with you because it's apparently become quite a popular medium for a number of filmmakers, amateur and professional. And I said, tell me more, I'm all ears. So they gave me a brief description of what was going on. I was rather dumbfounded. And then they said, would I like to come to the New York Film Festival to see the films that had been done? They were apparently having sort of a runoff of a competition, and to perhaps address the film festival. And I said, well, I would be delighted. Of course, I did it for very selfish reasons. It would give me a chance to see what's going on with my baby, because I had no idea up until this point. So that's where I got my initial indoctrination into the pixel, having not died at all. My little zombie had come back from the grave and was walking around doing things now with people, and it had come back into use and had been sort of reincarnated in a different way. Suddenly, it was no longer a child's toy; it was a toy for filmmakers, or a tool for filmmakers, which provided them with some very unique properties that they found endearing. So that's when I first discovered it. So it was really not until the mid-90s that I realized what was going on. Up until then, some people wanted to make it. Nothing ever serious came of it. I was focused on other things and just ignored the whole matter.
Besides the inexpensive price of the tool, what do you think is the attraction for artists to use pixel?
Well, I guess each artist has to decide on his own and state on their own. For me, I think it's the incredible essence of the camera, in that the camera has no hidden agenda. It has no controls. There is nothing to get in the way of communicating between what you want to do and what you have in your hand. There is no color to distract you. It is a simple, potentially very, very powerful way to communicate an idea. And I think that filmmakers probably like it for that simple honesty. The pixel is what you get. It has terrible flaws, but in the hands of a very creative person, they become advantages. It has tremendous limitations. In the hand of a very creative person, they become powerful statements. It has a very stripped down format, black and white, low resolution. If I focus close, I can really see pretty well. If I focus something far out there, it's very, very atmospheric and then pixelated. That in the hands of a creative person becomes a wonderful tool. The tools are simple. The product itself is raw. And I think in the hands of a particular type of person, this becomes a very, very endearing characteristic, because you can't take a new Sony camcorder and easily strip it into black and white with low resolution and a small dot format to give it a grainy, essential look. That becomes a special effect which has to be built into it. Most of them are not. This camera was this way, and you literally pointed it, you shot, and what you got was what you think you got plus pixel magic, or as I would rather say, pixel madness.
Pixel magic is a very good word. Jim, how did it make you feel did you see Hamlet on the big screen?
I didn't see it on the big screen. I saw it in my own home on a videotape.
And how did it make you feel to see a feature film with not only utilizing pixel vision, but also having a movie star run around New York using a pixel camera?
I was really amazed. I was amazed that Miramax got behind the program as well as they did. I was amazed that Michael chose the subject that he did. Hamlet is not an easy thing, especially doing a contemporary theme of Hamlet. Struck me as being very tough. To introduce pixel into it was, I thought, wildly bizarre. And to see Ethan Hawke and Sam Shepard and others as part of it, frankly, I was very delighted and rather flattered that it had come to this. Very, very amusing. Michael had called me and really as an awfully nice courtesy, had asked me if I would come to the cast party in New York City. Miramax is a New York City facility. All the filming was done, I believe, there. The staff and the actors were there, and he asked me to join in on this party, which was great. Luck would have it, I had an associate coming in from, of all places, California, this decadent side of the world, sent one of my friends to me, and I had to meet with him that night. And I invited him. I said, "You want to be part of a casting party and meet all these wonderful stars?" He says, "No, I want to talk to you about a project I'm doing." I had to go out and have dinner with him, eating my heart out that I could have been part of this wonderful party, seeing this great thing, and here I was with my friend Malcolm talking about his particular little problems with his business. So I missed the casting party, and the gods had finally gotten back at me. They had cursed me for all that we had done and said, "You're not going to be part of this wonderful fame and fortune."
A couple of philosophical questions, and you could bring a Pixel Vision thoughts if you want, not necessary. What do you think is more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction.
Why?
Anyone can compromise. Very few people have convictions.
Do you think ambition is based more on fear or joy?
Probably fear. Fear of failure. So you always push ahead. That's why I think creative people always push the art, because they're afraid of failure. They're always pushing the threshold. And I can also tell you, a very conservative person will never push the threshold because he's driven by fear as well. So there is a desire, I think the artist has a desire to say something, to communicate. It's a desire to be expressive. And if you don't choose one medium for doing it, you'll choose another. Hemingway chose pen and paper. He had a wonderful sense of sequence and words and could create wonderful imagery. Artists do the same thing. Look at simple artists who do wonderful things in simple elegance. Matisse did wonderful cutouts that he arranged beautifully on paper, and suddenly the space between them became as dominant as the cutouts themselves. What a simple, elegant way to make a statement. So essential. Compared with, say, Jackson Pollock running around with a brush doing action painting, which struck me as being rather fantastic, but in some regards an awful lot of energy for a statement. Think of a guy making the same statement with Pixel Vision. He points, he shoots, it's done, the statement's made.
Yeah, if there was a large statue built in your honor, what would it be made of, and where would you like it displayed?
Probably like to have it made of salt, and probably like to have it stand in the Plaza Square in Morristown, New Jersey, so people can walk around it. And each time they walk around, it's morphing. It's becoming more and more obsolete, and slowly being eaten away by the weather until, just like Pixel, there's nothing left.
That's good. Now, I want to open it up just to make sure these guys, either of you guys have any questions you want to ask? Doug, you got anything?
Well, the question I wanted to ask about the black box, was that because of the size of the image, or how did you come up with the black box around it?
Oh, we didn't come up with it. It came up.
Mention the black box.
Yeah, we really didn't come up with the black box. The black box came up with us because we had to have it. We can only get so many pixels into a television set, and everything else was a border. So we said, what are we going to do with this? We have to make this look like it's deliberate. And of course, I looked at it and said, well, we need to have a great picture frame because the pixel could get very weak depending upon the television you use, how far you view it from the cabinetry. So that became a black frame that we put around, not because we wanted to do it aesthetically, but it was in some regards almost demanded by the pixel count that we had in the technology.
Is it really black or is it deep gray?
Oh, I don't have a clue. I think we probably want it to be black. What it becomes, that's up to the television. Televisions have their own life, you know.
They do. You know, Corla Pandit says television is not real. You try to convince Americans or anyone that television isn't real. People think television's real, right?
Absolutely.
No.
And they see, and what is on television they seem to think is real.
Exactly.
And frankly, to digress into something else, we had a video game business before all of this, which we sold off. We sold off for reasons which were terribly good. I thought that games were getting too violent. And I thought the kids would be spending all their time in front of a monitor playing violent video games. And I thought, frankly, I want something just the opposite. And Pixel was just the opposite. It was get out in the street with a camera and be expressive and be artistic. Don't be a sludge and sit around watching and playing video games. Get out there and express yourself. And maybe you too can be another Steven Spielberg.
Perfect. Groucho Marx says, television's very educational. When someone turns one on, I go in the other room and read a book. And the other thing someone said, like in McLuhan, they said the video games are good because only 2 kids can play, so it forces the other kids to go out and play.
That's probably very true.
Okay, so I would love to run out this tape. One thing is, maybe you could say, hello, I'm James Wickstead, or say your name, and then say your 3 or 4 top inventions, and I also invented Pixel Vision. Just sort of give them a sense of what you've invented that you're most proud of, and then sort of end with Pixel Vision, or just put it in the midst of the...
Okay. I'm Jim Wickstead. I'm the owner of James Wickstead Design Associates, a design and engineering company in New Jersey. We have, over the years, developed products, and I say we because it's not myself singularly. It's a team of very creative engineers and designers. What am I proud of? I am probably very proud of patient-controlled analgesia. It is a product which allows a patient, when they're in the hospital recovering from a serious operation, to basically control their own pain management. It was one of the first products done of that kind in the United States. It became a standard of the industry, and frankly, it has been a delight to work in the medical products industry, knowing you're making people's lives a little bit more comfortable, a little bit easier. A second product we did that I have very warm regards for is a medical product, but this time for animals. This is a blood chemistry analyzer that analyzes the blood content of a drop of blood. It tells you the chemistry, and it tells you more specifically whether that chemistry is within the proper range for that type of animal. This, as it turned out, has been sold by a very major company called IDEX Laboratories. It is the standard used in virtually every animal hospital today. And we designed it from literally concept to final production documentation. So we're very pleased with that. I was very pleased about a toy we did for a company called Ohio Art. Ohio Art makes a company that everybody knows called Etch-a-Sketch. We developed a product which was an electronic version of Etch-a-Sketch called the Animator. It brought your drawings to life. And Ohio Art sold that handsomely. It was a wonderful product, again, a very creative tool for youngsters, something which is sort of our trademark, I guess, de facto. And I'm very pleased with that. But I am especially pleased with the Pixel. The PXL-2000 camera is probably, I guess it will be the product which I and maybe my company are known for, because it not just was good for children, but it developed another life which no one anticipated in the hands of filmmakers. And as such, I guess we could say it's become sort of an icon or a cult product. But from my standpoint, the fact that it has had such a long life, it has influenced many people, and it has been perhaps an educational tool for the artist as well as the amateur youngster, is very gratifying. And to be able to be sitting in front of a camera 16 years, 17 years after it was conceived is reassuring.
Great. Jim, thanks a lot. Now I have one final special request, if you don't mind. My pixel short for my festival next year is about the double duty interrobang. That's a piece of punctuation where it's a question mark superimposed with an exclamation point. So I don't know if you remember that punctuation, but it was popular for a little while. It's called a double duty interrobang. And I'm sort of doing this abstract artsy-fartsy piece on double duty interrobangs and the blue chip being removed. I was wondering if you would mind going into an acting mode and fake like you're crying that you put the blue chip in the pixel camera and somehow say the word double duty interrobang. Like say, Mr. Double Duty Interrobang, I'm sorry I put the blue chip in. Do you think I could get you to stretch? Or say it in it, if you don't want to cry and do it, if you're willing, do it in any way you want. anything, if you could say double duty interrobang and blue chip in any sort of way that I could use, it'd be great. And it's no big deal if you don't want it.
I'm not much of an actor.
All right.
But let me just say this. Mr. Double Duty Interrobank, I am really damn sorry I put that blue chip in.
Did you get that? Thank you, Jim. Now, we still have 10 minutes. Since you're so philosophically brilliant, I've got a few more philosophical questions, but if you're worn out...
I'm not worn out at all. No,
okay. So we just run to the end of the tape. What do you got, like 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 8 minutes.
Jim, if you met yourself as a 12-year-old walking down the street today, what would you say to yourself?
I would say, why the hell don't you have a pixel in your hand? And why aren't you doing films and not worrying about inventing stuff?
Oh, God, that was too... that was good. What element...
Make sure he answers, he brings in the...
You want to do that one over again?
Yeah.
Say...
Oh, I'll never remember what I said.
That's good.
Sorry.
That's all right, because he can repeat it. What elements of your inventing have remained constant over the years?
What elements remain constant? I guess it's the faith that we can truly make it happen.
You've always been you've always been determined that it can happen.
Yeah, with invention, you know, a lot of times you have an awful lot of doubt about what can truly be done. It's when the technical aspects of an invention suddenly rear their head, and they quickly distort the prime focus of the invention. And you've always got to kind of keep your eye on the target and listen only partially to all the technical babbling that goes on around you about this can't be done, we can't really make this happen. You've got to always say, yes, we can make it happen. And when the chips are down, you get in there yourself and you just spend hours and weeks resolving and finding out how to make it occur. And you will make it occur.
What's your favorite form of information?
Video. I love video. To me, that's my favorite form of information.
What's the most overrated idea in the Western world?
The most overrated idea in the Western world? Probably that the Western world is dominant and really has it all together. It doesn't. It's merely occupying this space, this time, for a short period. Prior to this, there were so many other cultures that had wonderful technologies, wonderful ideas, wonderful things. We just exist here for a short period of time. The concept of us being predominant is fleeting, and to me it's an illusion. It's highly overrated. One of the reasons why the United States has such trouble getting along with the rest of the world, we have such a big ego. We have a big ego because we live on an island floating from everyone else. The internet is quickly bringing us together. Air transportation brings us together. Kids today get out of college, they go to other countries, and they come back saying, wow, that's great. When I was much younger, I lived in Montevideo, Uruguay, as on assignment down there working. When I came back after 5 months of that, I had a very different perspective of the United States and a great regard for this tiny little country living just a little bit north of Argentina. They were so wonderful, so genteel, so European cultured, and had their act together. We work our ass off in the United States. Down there, they work hard too, but they play. They have a wonderful sense of play. And I think that's very European. We exist here in a vacuum and think that we're on top of it. We're not. And we're not members of the international community responsibly in many cases.
McLuhan said that we invent things and they are actually extensions of our human sensorium. So we invented clothing as an extension of our skin. The wheels extension of our feet and legs. The fork and knife extension of our teeth. What do you think a pixel is an extension of?
Well, I think pixel is probably an extension of our need to communicate. I think that's an essential part of the human psyche, the need to reach out to other people and to talk, to be able to communicate with them. Some people want to communicate in an artistic way. Some people are embarrassed to write poetry. They think it's effeminate. Some people wouldn't dare pick up a pencil and pen and paint for fear that their initial strokes would be mocked. I think that communication is a key and essential tool that every person needs, regardless of their culture, regardless of their age, regardless of where in the world they are. It's a human condition.
What's the most significant difference between men and women, besides plumbing?
I think in some regards, a woman is quite a bit more intelligent than a man. In many regards, I think there's a tremendous ability to perceive people, where I think men don't perceive people very well at all. I see no difference in creativity. I think women are highly creative. And the sad part is most of them don't seem to be that well known in the field. They're very quickly eclipsed by the men. But I think that that a woman brings a very different set of perceptions to anything. And I've always wished we could have more women in, as an example, industrial design, because their perception to products, how products are used, to markets, is to me very valuable. And sadly, most of them don't go into the marketplace. They end up in other careers or as homemakers, which to me is rather a waste of wonderful talent.
What was your earliest memory? Or what is your earliest?
My earliest memory, believe it or not, I can remember. I was in a crib in my parents' home. I can recall the wallpaper on the wall. I recall the wallpaper were trains and locomotives. I recall it was dominantly blue. I recall the walls of the crib, and I recall it was a summer evening. It had gotten dark, but it was stifling hot out. One of those hot summer sweltering nights in New Jersey. And I remember hearing in the distance thunder. We're coming over the hill. I had a way of doing that in New Jersey. It rolled in from the west, and it was very distant. And then it got closer, and it was, I don't recall lightning, but I recall the sound of a gentle rain. And I recall a cool breeze coming in through a window which was open. That window was facing the west. And I remember suddenly this incredible sense of relief as suddenly the room became cooler and I became comfortable. Believe it or not, that is the first memory I have. It's probably the oldest memory I have, and I've never forgotten that memory. It is as vivid to me today as probably the day it happened, and I have no idea why.
What role do dreams play in the inventor's life?
I don't know whether dreams have much of a role. I believe in some cases they do, and I believe that it's a very personal thing. Dreams have very little effect on my inventing or my work. Yet I've talked to other people who are influenced by their dreams to the point that they literally invent in their dreams. I've certainly had occasion to write something down in the middle of the night, a great idea. I wake up in the morning and look at it, and suddenly it occurred to me, that's the stupidest idea I've ever had in my life, yet it seems so brilliant in my dream. So I don't know what it really does play. I think it's a very personal thing, and I think if you ask 4 people, 10 people, you'd probably get 4 or 10 different answers.
We're out.
Are you out too?
Yeah.
Almost? Or
I got like a minute or 2.
is loyalty based on reason?
Loyalty? I think loyalty is first based on love. You gotta love something to be loyal to it. And I think it's true of people. And love isn't a physical love, it's that love of an emotional click, where basically you got the same chemical reaction and the chemistry on the product or the person where the event is there, and that's love. And that becomes in turn loyalty.
Jim, thank you so much, sir.
You're very welcome.
I'd go for another 4, but I don't want to wear these guys out. That was so sweet, and you're even going to be in my new Pixel film.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Because he'll take the footage and then shoot it with Pixel off the other TV. See, that's where I was. And I didn't even ask you the question that makes people cringe, but I will ask you if you don't mind.
No.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck, and someone threw a bag of shit at your head, what would you do?
I remember this.
Probably move my head from side to side.
Good. Well, I get a lot of great answers to that one, but I used it at the lecture for his classes because I use it to illustrate Edgar Allan Poe's Maelstrom poem, where he studied, you know that poem where he studies the whirlpool swooping him down to his death, and he studies the patterns and uses the patterns to swoop himself out. Information overload.